Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. All right. My name is Steve Zylstra. I'm the president and CEO of the Arizona Technology Council. We're a statewide organization here in Arizona, a trade association that represents science and technology-based enterprises. And I'll be your moderator this morning. And we have three incredible panelists here today that have deep backgrounds in science and technology, investing, disrupting, and so on. So we're going to start here to my left, and we're going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about who they are and what they do.
Hi, I'm Stephan Albert Johnston. I'm CEO of Calviri, whose mission is to end cancer. We develop cancer diagnostics and vaccines.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for our sponsors for putting off a great event. Appreciate it. I am Andy Lombard. I'm founding partner for Tesoro VC. We are an AI and semiconductor accelerator and fund, headquartered here in the great Phoenix, Arizona. I'm also founding partner and managing director for Health Impact Venture Capital, which is a Series A to Series C health tech investment fund.
Thanks. Dave Blivin, founder and managing director of Cottonwood Technology Funds. We started Cottonwood in 2010 in Santa Fe. We have a regional focus here in the Southwest, New Mexico and the surrounding states. Arizona, of course, is included in that. We do hard tech, seed stage, so we do things that have to be built. We help them fund the first prototypes, proof of concepts, open doors to customers. We also have an office in the Netherlands and do the same thing in Northern Europe.
Very good. Well, the title of our panel today is Economies of Innovation. And we're going to start with kind of a broad question. Again, we'll go my left to right here. So how do venture capital firms, technological disruptors, and industry leaders promise an innovative future that involves everything from fusion energy to artificial intelligence and quantum-enabled technologies?
Well, I'd include the biological front. Also, I might have a lot of innovation on that front. One of the things, I can think of a couple things. One is to get out of the way. The bureaucracies that have become established are often an impediment to innovations. And I think we need to start getting the people that are concerned about it to get the bureaucracies to establish strict risk-benefit analysis, which they do not apply now, I can tell you, at least from the biological side, to new technologies, so that they're not always being the negative aspect of that. And the other thing is that I'd like to see more innovative type of investment formats. I would suggest that we, both at the national and the state level, we have an innovation bank that gives low interest loans to innovative projects. And as I understand from my conversations the other day with people in Quebec, apparently they're already doing something like that there. But I think that's a much better, if not an alternative, a better complement to the venture funding that we do for innovations now.
Very good. Andy?
Thanks, Steve. I just love the question. I mean, it's a great setup for kind of what we're thinking. So Tesoro is an AI and semiconductor accelerator. So if you think about AI and semiconductor from my perspective, it's going to exist for generations. It's not going away. Chips, hardware, and software are just not going away. Underneath that is healthcare, is robotics, is applications for that. So we love it because it touches every industry. It touches all of our lives. And the great question is, how does it impact the new aspects of quantum, fusion, and others? So what's cool about this is, if you think about quantum, that is an engine for AI. It is going to supercharge what's already being supercharged through all of the chips and all of the work that's been going on. And we're awfully excited about that. And if you think about AI, it is essentially learning and training It's then starting to think, and then it's going to act, okay? So training, reasoning, agentic. If you've heard those words, but it's really just simple thought processes, but it takes a lot to do it. It takes incredible factories, incredible chip companies like NVIDIA and TSMC and all of the other scalers. But in doing so, right now we're in a loop of incredible energy consumption. So fusion becomes incredibly important for our future. And if you start to combine all of that, the future has never been brighter in terms of what we see as an outlook for innovation across the board. We see quantum and hybrid quantum coming out very soon, with software quantum first and then hardware quantum, to make this more efficient. What that means is that it can be less power, faster speeds, higher ratings of training, and so forth. And then with fusion, obviously, we are going to consume so much power. In fact, if you're not aware, AI companies are really forming into power companies. So if we can start to limit that and start to reduce that, I think we're going to be in an incredible position. So all of this is relevant, and for us, the fun is going to be, how do we infuse that and diffuse it in every level of applications and technology to really make it applications and capabilities that are going to value all of humanity.
Dave?
Yeah, so we have invested in some quantum companies. We've actually invested in a fusion company. So we deal with this. I mean, I think one of the interesting things, I mentioned we're based here in the Southwest, and we also have an office in Northwest Europe. And before I came to this region, I started and built a fund in the Southeast. And so what you find when you've done all this is that there's great innovation everywhere. Every single state, every single country has innovation related to all these areas. Quite often, the difficulty is, how do you get those ideas out into the commercial environment, right? Because many of these countries, many of these states don't have the capital resident to support and identify these technologies. They don't have the experienced management necessarily to connect to these companies and help them grow and attract capital that it needs to really become a prosperous company. And so that challenge is really global. I mean, all the money, tends to be in like California or Boston. There's a few pockets of venture, but that's not where all the ideas are. And so there's always this kind of interesting balance, I think, in terms of, what is the government's role? Like Stefan was saying, get the government out of it to some extent. But on the financing side and on the management side, it is, I think, important for emerging areas that want to take advantage of their commercial opportunities that their innovation represents. If you talk to any governor, any mayor, any president of any country, they will always talk about tech commercialization as a pathway to job creation and economic diversification. And yet, there's always this sort of, well, what is the government's role then? Should we just let the private sector take care of it and we are the beneficiaries? What you find in practice is the private sector is not going to take care of it just because they're not in pockets. And so the government does have to take a proactive role when they don't have the resources they need resident to these ideas to put in place projects and programs, help identify some of the most promising innovation in their communities, help get some initial funding, maybe 100% government for what they call tech maturation, in terms of how do you take science from sort of science to a real application that can then attract investment capital. And then even on the investment capital side, if you don't have the resident capital, there's always this sort of concept of the better mousetrap, that the best ideas will always find money, will always find management. But in the real world, that doesn't happen. Money kind of finds what's close to it, especially at the earliest stages. Management finds kind of what's close to it at the earliest stages. And so we may be talking a little bit about this later as well, but I think that's kind of government role in terms of understanding there is a proactive sort of need for local, state, national governments to sponsor innovation, have a screening mechanism. So, I mean, you can't sponsor everything. And like in New Mexico, they have a program now for tech maturation. It's not just a screening on the science, but it's also screening from industry experts and investors to really identify those new emerging technologies that have the most potential to have a commercial impact.
Well, you've already covered a little bit of my next question, but let's dig deeper. So what breakthroughs have been made that will revolutionize industry as we know it? And what are the challenges and opportunities that come with commercializing and scaling up these projects? Andy, you want to give us a start on that?
Yeah, I think I was speaking to some of you last night that very, very bright people recently had said, hey, AI is already done. And I laughed. I was like, hang on a second. To use a baseball analogy, the Star-Spangled Banner is playing right now, okay? The field is just getting populated with players, and people are just coming up to bat. And the reason I say that is because AI is really something that is game-changing. I lived through the first cellular revolution in wireless with Motorola. I lived through the first semiconductor activities that they did, not way back when, but when they started to really build out their fabs and factories in China. And had the opportunity to live through the internet wave as well. All of those are important, but what we are seeing right now with artificial intelligence is absolutely incredible. And I think that's the number one thing that I see right now. I know that it may be passé for some investors, which is crazy. I know that there's a lot of great focus on it, but it's so important because quantum is going to be an engine for the future for that. And as we start to use hybrid solutions and looking at how to accelerate this growth, it's going to be a lot of fun on how we get there. So for me, it's about how do we as a group, a country, a region, as a technology segment, infuse that in applications. So right now we're getting past that training stage where we're starting to get into AI starting to reason and think. And what is very important about that, it's going to allow us to have AI to start to act on things. Obviously, that's scary. Obviously, that needs some boundaries. But when we get to that point where we have agents that are able to do things for us, we can set goals, we can set them to work for us, and it becomes an incredible economic productivity for us. So I think that's, for me, going to be the enabling factor, and the technologies that start to come around that, like quantum infusion, are going to add to that capability in my lifetime, which I'm pretty excited about.
Stefan, what about in the healthcare industry?
So I sort of see two things. One is they're not here yet in terms of the AI, but I think they're right around the corner. One is that the development of a single assay that can detect any disease early, so that everybody's being screened for early detection of any disease, and it will be inexpensive. And I think the technology is almost there for that, and I expect to see that happen soon. And I can't tell you what the impact of such a thing would happen in the healthcare. It's hard to imagine because it will change everything. You know, the future of hospitals, the type of drugs that we develop. Rather than for late stage therapies, we're going to develop things that are very safe for early treatment. It would really transform things, not only in our country, but in the developing countries where, 70% of most chronic diseases occur in developing countries. And 1 billion people out there don't even have electricity, let alone good health care. Imagine the lost Einsteins that we will uncover when we start giving good health care and treatment to the 70% of the people that don't have it right now. The second thing that I think is probably even closer, maybe, is vaccines to prevent chronic diseases. I think we're pretty close to, I'm sure we could make a vaccine right now that could prevent cancer in people. It's doable. It's been demonstrated it's doable. And you have to get things out there. And I think it can be followed by vaccines to prevent Alzheimer's and probably even aging. So those things I think will turn up relatively soon as capabilities that would transform healthcare. The impediment for that, or at least one of the impediments for bringing these things forward in a timely fashion, are the clinical trial mechanisms. We need to start bringing innovations to how we test drugs and therapies and treatments that created those entities. We need to bring that same kind of innovation to the clinical trial venue itself. So how could we, if somebody had a vaccine that they thought could decrease aging, how can we get that tried and tested and out to people as quickly as possible? I think one of the solutions to that is to trust people's judgments, to make their own risk assessments when they enroll in trials, not to have the paternalistic sort of system we have now that doesn't let people decide their own risks in terms of enrolling in trials. But I think healthcare will be almost exciting as AI and quantum.
So, Dave, one of the things I want to make sure you cover is you've invested in quantum and fusion. Those are really long plays. What are the difficulties and challenges with those particular types of technology and innovation, particularly as an investor?
Yeah, from an investment standpoint, I think for most investors, again, there's kind of the government side, right? Or maybe some of the big corporations that can invest way ahead of the market. As an investor, you really can't invest way ahead of the market because you've got to get a return on investment. So when we look at our quantum investments and others that I think are being made generally by, private sector, they tend to be things where, there's an immediate revenue opportunity and application for quantum. For example, one of our quantum investments is related to cybersecurity, and so they can take quantum principles but they can implement it in the existing infrastructure. So they've got a number of pilots with telecommunications industry and some other government agencies on using quantum, which is theoretically uncrackable, applying it in the current infrastructure. So you don't have to wait for the whole quantum infrastructure to be in place to use some of these technologies today that have immediate application. The other quantum investment we have is related to its ability to test, as you develop these, what they call qubits, which is about the only thing I know about quantum. So qubits are essentially these chips. As those get developed, they get iterated and optimized and tested. And so we have a company that automates a lot of that testing and kind of accelerates the feedback loop. And it's not, if you're developing qubits, you don't necessarily want to also have to develop all the technology needed to test those qubits. You want to be able to focus on that piece of the pie, if you will. So they've sold several units already to people like an IBM or whatever to help them accelerate these iterations and develop more quickly the next generation of qubits, solve the problems, get the insights, and continue to keep the ball moving in a little bit faster way. So yeah, I mean, I think, any of these technologies, there's always, again, this kind of, where's the crossover between sort of government support, kind of long-range thinking and long-range potential and immediate application, where there's a chance to build an application and a business around the technology, start to get financial support. Because I think Andy's right. I mean, AI is going to drive so many sort of, when you think of like the space program, like 50 years ago, all the technologies that had to come together to support space travel, and how many of those technologies that end up in the commercial sector. And you think about AI, and in some ways it's similar, right? You got power, and you got semiconductor chips, and you got software, and you got different applications. And so these kind of generational sort of advances in technology, it's not just AI, it's everything that then is needed to support that ecosystem and the continued development.
You see, just to follow up, that quantum will be essentially computing as a service as opposed to, individual enterprises and so on owning quantum computing?
Do I think that?
Yeah.
I think that's probably where it starts because of the cost, right? But like everything else, when you look at Moore's Law, I mean, over time, you might have a quantum computer in your phone. So I'm not going to try to predict what's going to happen, but that tends to be the path of technology, right? I mean, it starts out, it's very expensive. It's limited access for specialized applications. I mean, right now, mostly quantum's talked about in terms of a lot of sophisticated modeling around climate change and drug discovery and things like that. But eventually, the costs come down. Technologies emerge that allow it to be more accessible. And
I'm going to go down a little different path now. So we're in a time where we're experiencing some of the most significant geopolitical strains that we've felt, maybe in my lifetime at least. How does that affect innovation in America, across the world? Andy, you want to start with that?
Gosh, I thought we weren't going to get into this.
got a softball.
So I did have good setup, I guess. A week and a half ago, I had an opportunity to be at Harvard Law School with 3 presidential administrations doing national security and export controls and national statecraft, which is, decisions on policy on AI and semiconductor. And this is very, very, public that the goal is a race. This was a concept of Chris Miller's book on chip war and how that transpires. So if you start to look at that, there were some good analogies, although not efficient analogies, that similar to the nuclear race of getting a weapon, there's a race to ensure there's a control of the chip environment geopolitically. So a lot of what we're seeing in our dynamics are revolving around this today. So the most sophisticated chips from NVIDIA that TSMC makes here, or will make later this year here, that are making right now, Apple's chips out of our factory here. We need to think about what usages those chips can be used for, because they can be used for very, very sophisticated weaponized approaches to actually pinpoint weapons literally in the circle around this small area that we're sitting versus a circle revolving around this entire state. That sophistication is there, and it's not just China looking at that, it's others. So I think that has an effect on growth, right? When you look at the differences between the United States, for example, and China, there's differences on ideology of what those technologies are being used for and how they're being developed. So China has developed a civil military fusion concept, which is essentially right off the bat dual use for militarization to ensure that they are the strongest military force around. So I think that scares the United States a little bit in terms of why they react the way we react. So we look at export controls and don't allow those most sophisticated chips to end up in China. Similarly, on the front that Dave was talking about in terms of surveillance and other things, companies that are, let's just say, controlled, maybe not owned, or controlled and owned by China, like Huawei. We don't want that to be infused in our cellular operating infrastructure, our shipping channels, our utilities, and so forth. So those chipsets that are used in those can be used for surveillance, encryption, and cyber attacks and other things. So there is a national security element to this that is very real. And by the way, that's not a political statement. That is across all administrations from the last 5 administrations. It's known. So what happens is we slow the innovation down with that tremendously, because when we look at where things can happen, Dave made a really great point, and our thesis believes this, that innovation can happen anywhere. China proved that earlier this year. Whether you read reports on the side of believing everything of it or not, but DeepSeek created something with a very reduced level of chipsets and computing power that was good enough to do the types of things that they needed to do. And that can be done anywhere. Quantum is going to be developed in multiple areas throughout the world. This is not a unified effort of only ours. So when there's a lack of that sharing, a lack of that proliferation, it naturally will start to slow activities. And then when you react in the way we're tending to react now, with other components of policy, you're naturally going to maybe have a slowing effect on capital investment and the things that are going to be required to advance the ball on all of these efforts, including AI and data centers and all of the things that we're going to be really needing to meet those goals of getting to AI being able to think and act and so forth. So I think it does slow it down.
Well, one thing I wanted to just comment on that, because at a macro level, I think geopolitics, if you will, has like zero effect. Globally, to the point you sort of made, this innovation is going to occur, and it's going to occur at a very rapid rate. And we can say, like as the United States, we're going to try to control the development of AI and how it's applied. We might do that, but a lot of other countries won't, or quantum or any of these things. And so, thinking that we can somehow control the advancement of technology and make sure it's only used for appropriate causes and things like that is a little bit naive, I think. There's smart people everywhere. These technologies are being developed very quickly all over the world. And to the extent that we try to slow down innovation here to better control it, all it really means is we're going to be behind a lot of other countries who are not going to slow down, and then we're going to be trying to catch up, right? And so I think in most cases, we're better off being the leaders, being the most aggressive and having the most hands-off approach that we can and deal with these problem cases as they occur, but not try to put a lid on innovation.
I would just add that I think that geopolitics can sometimes have an impact on two countries' willingness or ability to collaborate around innovation, right? There's a lot of, particularly in the academic research area, there's a lot of collaboration that goes on around the world, and sometimes governments can get in the way of that. What about in the healthcare sector? Does geopolitics have an impact on bioscience and healthcare?
Well, I'm sure it does, and I think you're referring to is the situation now with more geopolitical. I look at this more from an evolutionary point of view. Evolution only takes place during periods of uncertainty, where something upsets something. You have an environmental change, a new species comes in, or maybe appropriate today, a meteorite hits. But that change drives innovation biologically. And I think that same thing is true in this situation here, is that, yes, you haven't used the buzzword now, uncertainty. It used to be sustainability, now it's uncertainty. But there is uncertainty, but I think that's good. It does drive innovation. And I would choose the uncertainty now over the certainty we had previously, where clearly we were deindustrializing, our middle class was shrinking, and our health was going downhill. So we got to do something, and particularly in the healthcare area. And so I think I'm not sure how things will turn out. Who knows? And I don't take much stock in most people predicting what's going to happen here. But I think the drive, as they were saying, the drive for innovation is going to happen anyway, and it'll change the world.
I always love when people use analogies on business that invoke biology, right? Because there are so many analogies between biology, how it works, and how business processes work. So what are the strategies that could be used to support early innovation outside of venture centers? Let's start with you, Dave. And then how to support their growth while keeping them based in a particular city or region of origin.
So say that one more time in terms of how to support outside of the private sector. So what can government do? Is that sort of the question?
Well,
Or it doesn't have to be government?
what I'm referring to, one of you said earlier, most of the capital is on the coasts, right?
Right.
But I think it was, but a lot of innovation occurs throughout the country. And historically, what had been the case is if investors from the coast invested in a company in New Mexico, say, they might insist that that company move proximate to where the capital is.
Right.
How do we do a better job of allowing companies to stay in the place of their origin and provide the resources and support that are necessary for their success, whether that's government or otherwise?
Well, I think, there's a government element to it for sure. Along those lines, these companies, if I take New Mexico as an example, they've done an increasingly better job of trying to provide resources, generally through matching, both investing in other funds that might not be based in New Mexico but are willing to consider New Mexico, also co-investing with those funds when they do invest in New Mexico, so those companies have more capital. But then they kind of stop there. So there's kind of this idea we need to help more companies get started, whether it's angel networks and angel tax credits, which help create a little bit of a financial incentive for angels to invest early in these companies. What we've seen, because we've invested in a number of companies in New Mexico now over the last 15 years, and several have raised 50, 100 million plus. And when that happens, in a lot of cases, as you're growing a company, you're going to do a search for a CEO because the company's growing, it's got more people to manage, more opportunity, and you want to get someone quite often in who's already done that before. And we've done maybe 6 or so CEO searches. 100% of the time when we've hired a new CEO, they've not been from New Mexico, and 100% of the time they've not moved to New Mexico. And 100% of the time, those companies have ultimately moved out of New Mexico, right? So we've made this early investment hoping to create jobs and economic impact. And, is that the government's problem? You could say, well, that's not the government's problem. The private industry companies need to go where they need to go. But it is somewhat the government's problem. It's not really the private company's problem. It's not really my problem. It's like I don't invest in these companies with the requirement that they start and stay and grow in New Mexico. We're trying to create successful companies, and they got to go where they got to go to get what they need to get in terms of management and money, customers, et cetera. So, I've been trying to highlight this a little bit for the state of New Mexico, but it really gets into, there's a number of states that have been pretty successful at this, Pennsylvania and Ohio over time, where they've looked at it more holistically. So yeah, let's help more companies get started, but let's think about more life cycle support. What do they need at the next stage? And part of it's capital, but part of it's management. What kind of programs could we create to attract people to move to the state? Maybe tax related, maybe other strategies. So when they join these companies, they have an incentive also to move here. So this full life cycle kind of anticipation. Again, at some point you're California maybe, and you don't have to do any of this, right? But when you're not California and you're competing against every other state and every other country for these ideas and the ability to build these companies, I think you do have to think more holistically in terms of what is the total pie that has to be, and where are the gaps, whether it's skilled workforce at the kind of entry mid-level, and how do you create skilled workforce to fill the jobs that would be created by these companies, or whether it's at the top, and how do we get key, again, not to belabor the point, but like New Mexico has a program called LEADA, which is a recruitment tool. So they can recruit companies to come to New Mexico, and one of the things they offer is to, say, buy them a building, because they need a building, right? So they'll essentially lend the company the money so that they can afford to move to New Mexico. They got a building, quote, for free based on how many jobs they're going to create. But buildings don't create jobs. People do, right? So politically, it's easier, right? You got the state owns a building. If the jobs aren't created, the state can own the building. They can resell it or release it. But But that is not going to create the jobs. What's going to create the jobs are the executive level talent that understands how to compete with other companies and grow these companies. So I do think there's a role for government in these kind of emerging markets to think strategically, not just how to help them get started and assuming they'll be fine and just stay there forever and grow there forever. But there's a lot of other resources that are needed to support these companies' growth. And if they're not available locally, they're going to have to seek them out.
So I'm proud to say that in 2007, the Arizona Technology Council ran the bill to create Arizona's Angel Investment Tax Credit, which is very generous. It's up to a 35% credit, and we just extended it 2 years ago for another 10 years here in Arizona. So, Andy, so
Take a crack at that question.
what's it? Well,
Yeah, so would I.
Thank you.
That's what I'm.
Yeah, so
I'm
I
gonna
think the question was
let me,
tactics.
Let me just say, you spent a number of years at the Arizona Commerce Authority. The issues that Dave was referring to, economic developers care a lot about, right? Keeping enterprises in the state, creating enterprises within the state, whether it's at the state level, the county level, the city level. You helped create programs here in Arizona that are fundamental to achieving that. The Arizona Innovation Challenge, Venture Ready, supporting of Venture Madness, all those kinds of things. Can you talk about that? And anything else you want to say?
Yeah. Just really quickly, Arizona Innovation Challenge is a 10-year program that we did non-dilutive capital for 165 companies. $150,000 to $250,000 check sizes of those companies. Very venture model, goes through an accelerator, and that portfolio total valuation is now $6.5 billion. So there's a beautiful, venture curve that exists in that accelerator model. The unfortunate part of that is we own nothing of that. It is not evergreen, it is budget. So my philosophy on that is you must have evergreen, you must invest, you must have something in this so that you can then continue to grow and so forth. One of the reasons why, and I'll get to tactics a little bit, we created, in partnership, by the way, with the City of Phoenix and Greater Phoenix Economic Development Council and Startup AZ as our three core community partners, on this thesis that AI and semiconductor is incredible in our state. There is now $300 billion of pledged investment in AI and semiconductor in our state. I know I saw $65 billion, that's $165 billion for TSMC, and then if you look at the data center side and all of the supply chain that comes along with that, including Mayo Clinic and Neuralink and Barrows Neurological Institute and all of the AI data centers, which is almost every single major company has invested and is planting roots here. It becomes a cool place. I've lived in 4 different countries. I've lived in China for 10 years and London twice and so forth. I would not be able to pick a better place to do an AI semiconductor accelerator than Phoenix, Arizona right now. It's a very cool thing. So what our goal is tactically is to say, okay, let's do a global call to action of the best startups, the best founders in the world, attract them here, have them come spend time, bring our ecosystem partners like TSMC, Amcor, ARM, NVIDIA, Google, Microsoft into this ecosystem, help them with capital, help them with mentoring, and grow them at a rapid rate. We want to do 100 companies a year. We're not going to start that way, but we're going to get there. And again, this is both software and hardware, which I think is really, really critical. So tactics are, we're going to do what we do really, really well. We're venture people. We're builders. We're creators of companies. What the City of Phoenix, what Greater Phoenix Economic Development Council, GPEC, what Startup AZ do really, really well is that attraction side, which is that communications of the why, the value proposition. Of course, we're going to influence that value proposition and say, this is a heck of a good place from an operating budget, from an ecosystem partnership, from resources and other capabilities, manufacturing and so forth. But philosophically, from my perspective, being a 6-time founder, it has to be the right decision. It can't be a forced decision, or you'll have situations where it starts here and goes somewhere else or other things. So I think that's really important. We want to go build these companies and then make them the next generation of great companies. And, we hope that they stay here. We're going to work hard with our partners to have that value proposition. But from my perspective, as long as those companies have some challenging roots here and get that started, that's going to be an incredible effort, and I think it's going to be super important for us.
Well, I just think it's, not to jump in front of you, but just to quickly follow up on that. I mean, it's an opportunity lost, though, for the region if all these companies come here and they all leave, right? And what does it take for them to stay here? Again, it's not your problem, but it is something that people should be thinking about. And just one simple example is skilled workforce. If they're going to stay here, they're going to need skilled workers, right? And so what is the pool of skilled workers?
Let me clarify, we're not saying that we don't want them or they're not going to stay here.
No, I know.
In fact, we think we're going to have an ability to attract thousands and thousands of talented individuals through this process. So I want to make sure we're clear.
Yeah, I'm just saying, from a government standpoint, a proactive approach to be a little bit ahead of the curve. So when these companies are graduating and they're looking to grow and they're looking to hire their next 2 or 3 people, do those people exist, right? It's a competitive landscape. And so you may have to increase the pool. And it's not something that Andy has to invest in, but it's something that the region ought to invest in or the city ought to invest in.
Stefan?
So all those points are really good, Phoenix is an amazing place right now in the computer space, not so much in the bio. But my focus has mostly been on what I think is a huge untapped resources of inventors that don't get to see the light of their inventions. And I think it's an opportunity lost. Most people don't know. The highest per capita invention state in the union is Idaho, and it's followed close by North Dakota. And so these are places where there's a lot of inventive capability that we're not realizing that potential. And I'll come back to this idea of a national innovation bank. Our country's had a history of national banks that were quite successful. Now, they largely funded large infrastructure projects. But the same principle could be done here, where you have an inventor goes get a low-interest loan, test this idea, no matter how wild it is, out to see if it will work. And if it's successful, not only do they pay taxes, but they get there's a return on the taxes they pay. So it is an evergreen bank, which is important for any type. I agree with this, for any type of investment policy. So I really think that this could be done on a state level as well as a national level. And I think there's a lot of, and I think it'll work better than a sovereign fund. I think it would be better to have it just strictly a bank that's focused on innovation and getting inventions see the light of day.
I just want to jump in on the healthcare side just very, very briefly. I don't take strong issue that Arizona is not yet a pharma bio. And I say yet. I have a duty because I'm on the steering committee of the Discovery Oasis Mayo Clinic endeavor, which is, in my opinion, one of the largest worldwide health innovation projects going on. And it's, if you're not familiar, it's 3 million square feet of vertical space that's being developed here in Phoenix to attract global pharma, health, tech, and so forth. In addition, the expansion of Mayo Clinic of nearly $2 billion. We're going to be the second largest footprint outside of Rochester. And then other things like, again, Mayo and Honor Health and all of our healthcare systems, I think it's starting to be that. So I just want to throw that out there. Things like Neuralink and Barrows, which is absolutely incredible. and NVIDIA and Mayo, really for the next generation of drug discovery and other capabilities. I think it's just going to be a wonderful spot. So I think that alchemy of that work with the work that the semiconductor and AI side is endeavoring in is just so exciting to me. So I have a fondness for the future of that, but I do agree that we could use a lot more, and I know that there's other endeavors that are going on to make that better.
So just a point on that, believe it or not, health and bioscience is the fastest growing sector in Arizona. It's not semiconductors, it's health and bioscience. And I serve on the Bioscience Roadmap Steering Committee, and you may know that 25 years ago we were a 5th tier city when it came to health and bioscience. Today we're actually a 2nd tier city. So this place has come a long way in that area. And some of the leading institutions in the world, Ryman's Alzheimer Institute is considered the best in the world by example. So we're closing in on time here. I have 10 more questions, but so besides a cancer vaccine, quantum, fusion, and AI, are there any under the radar innovations that you believe will be mainstream in the next 5 to 10 years?
I got one real quick one, and then I'm going to hand it off. Mathematics for 5th graders.
Yeah.
I mean it.
No, that's
and I mean
point.
it. China, if you think about it, they are teaching AI mathematics to 5th and 6th graders right now. And for us to get along on that curve, I think it's going to be super important. It's a simple move, right? Very hard to do, but that's something that we have to focus on.
Yeah, I'm going to go back into the bio area, and I think what's really going to become surprising is the impact of genetically modified organisms. That the capability that we have now to modify plants and animals is amazing. It's not being tapped the way it should. It took 20 years from the time that they first made golden rice, so it had vitamin A in it, to actually get out in the field and have an effect on the 1 million kids that die from vitamin A deficiency and 400,000 that go blind every year. It took it that long to go overcome the regulatory issues to get that health impact. And if we can get around that, the what we could do in the future is just amazing. I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal this morning, but they created 2 dire wolves. And we just as a real example, there's no reason why we couldn't have chicken and pigs that are totally resistant to flu. We could make those now, and that would break the whole flu cycle in the world. And I think things like that are going to start percolating up that will really surprise everybody.
Dave, we're going to have you finish this off with something really cool.
I don't know if it's as cool as those two, but I mean, we are seeing, I think, a lot of kind of resurgence of space and space-related technologies, whether it's all these LEO satellites and communications. We've got an investment in a company that does space power, and they're working on programs with potential people that want to like beam power from space down to Earth. So, I mean, you got fusion, but you also have some of these other things that may be future sources of power. Space travel, I think, is going to be, not tomorrow, but eventually. I think it'll be more like taking a plane, right, from Phoenix to Denver. You'll run up to the moon or out to Mars, perhaps. I don't think that's right away, but I think those are the things that are coming.
So as an Arizona Space Commissioner, that was the best way to end this panel. So thank you all very much.